Now, what I also love about you is that you shared with me that you are a jazz muso. Not that that has anything to do with our conversation, but I'd like to throw that in.
I wanted to be when I was a kid. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, never say never. You certainly have achieved a lot over the years, but I would like to start with you talking about your own personal journey. So, how did you go from being a psychologist, like studying psychology, and then entering the food industry? What made you change your career path?
Oh, I actually didn't necessarily change it. I had a dual career.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-wife, I was married for 28 years and she traveled for business and she was a focus group moderator. She was one of the original focus group moderators when there were only a handful of them in the country. And what would happen is she was, doing a group for one of the big food companies, and she specialized in understanding the emotional reasons for purchase. But she'd do it with these very soulful, creative, qualitative interviews. And the companies often, depending upon their research philosophy, they didn't want to take a $50 million advertising risk without having more quantitative information. And the problem was that you can't really ask people directly, you know, do you use the American Express card because it makes you feel you've got more status, or did you buy a BMW because you feel like you
Mm,
feel more potent? People want to think that they're smart shoppers, and you have this thing called rational purchasing consciousness and social desirability bias, and so it wasn't easy to quantify. So I had to use these indirect methods where I use inferential statistics and observational design to create these studies and analyze these studies, and then advise the companies on what we thought they should do. So I would be the guy that quantified everything, and I'd be traveling around, you know, working at those studies. That's how I get into that. But I was a child and family psychologist. I had an active practice until about 2000. I had an active practice with a lot of people in it,
mm-hmm.
and I was also doing the corporate consulting. So I did both. I did both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're here because we're talking about obesity, food obsession, binge eating, and that's the area that you're working in now. So, have you yourself or someone you know struggled with obesity or food obsession?
Oh God, Marissa, I have.
Yeah, but our
Uh,
listeners don't.
they don't. Okay, so I lost a war with a bagel in 1982, and I didn't wake up for 20 years. I was almost 300 pounds, and my triglycerides were over 1,000, and the doctors were yelling at me, and I had rosacea and eczema and psoriasis and early Hashimoto's, had all kinds of horrible autoimmune problems, which mostly went away. So they're still present, but I don't really have symptoms. Um, and the doctors were telling me I was going to die by the time I was 40 if I didn't do something about that. Um, but I found that I couldn't. I was a um, I was a kind of tall, muscular kid, and if I worked out a couple of hours a day, then I was lucky I could eat whatever I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got married and started driving 2 hours each way for graduate school and to see patients, and then I'd get home and my wife at the time, I'm divorced now, but she would want to talk to me, and then we had to run the business together. I just didn't have the time to work out. And I was getting older and my metabolism was slowing down, and I couldn't stop thinking about food anyway. I mean, I'd
Mm,
be sitting with my patients, be sitting with a suicidal patient and thinking, I really need another pizza. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Thank God I figured it out eventually. I didn't lose anybody. Um, but thank God I
wow.
figured it out eventually.
Mm,
And that's when I knew I was in trouble. So I spent 20 years going the traditional routes. I come from a family of psychologists and psychotherapists, and when something breaks in the house, we all ask it how it feels, and nobody knows how to fix it. So I took a depth psychology approach, and I went to all of these different doctors, thinking if I could only figure out what the hole in my heart was and
mm,
fill that up, then I wouldn't have to keep filling the hole in my stomach. And I cried and I screamed and I confessed all of my sins, and I lay down on the couch and told them about my mother, and I went to group therapy and Overeaters Anonymous, and I had a spiritual journey, and I did a lot of things which changed me as a person. They softened me, they made me a more soulful person. It was a very lovely journey in many ways, but it didn't help me with the eating. I'd get a little thinner, a lot fatter, a little thinner, a lot fatter, a little thinner, a lot fatter.
Wow. Even after all that work.
And eventually I realized that the problem was that there were several forces separate and apart from my personal psychology that were creating the problem. One of them was the big food industry. I saw them spending tens of millions of dollars to engineer these hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and et cetera toxins. And it's all geared to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain, like the brainstem, without giving you enough nutrition to feel satisfied. Now,
Mm,
the brainstem doesn't know love. If this is the brainstem, this thing says, do I eat it? Do I mate with it? Or do I kill it? It's like a bad college drinking game.
mhm.
It's the mammalian brain on top of that that says, before you eat, meat, or kill that thing, what impact is that going to have on your family and your loved ones and the relationships that are important to you and your tribe? And then the neocortex says, wait a minute, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact will that have on your long-term goals like health and fitness and weight loss, but also music and art and spirituality and everything that we think of as uniquely human. But I'm spending 20 years trying to love myself thin when the thing that's responsible for food addiction, this feast and famine response, it doesn't know love. I thought that's interesting, right? These are
Wow.
external forces, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter that I had a bad marriage or that, my mama didn't love me enough when I was a kid, or she dropped me on my head and her mother dropped her on her head. None of this stuff really matters. I mean, it matters to who I am and the struggles that I have. And in some ways, the difficult emotions can be triggers, but most people think that means you should eliminate the triggers. And there was an easier way that I didn't know about. That easier way was to switch paradigms. And rather than trying to love myself then and fill up that hole in my heart, I decided to be the alpha wolf of my own mind. When an alpha wolf is challenged for leadership, it doesn't say, oh my goodness, someone needs a hug. It growls and it snarls and it says, get back in line or I'll kill you. Grr, right?
Yes, yes.
So just like I would do with my reproductive organs or my bladder, which are both very powerful biological drives, both of those organs generate very powerful biological drives. I would say, look, there are ways to express them. I can't just go, if I have to pee, I can't just go whenever I want to. I have to wait till the end of the meeting and take care of that. I actually went before, so please don't worry. Or if there's
So did I.
oh, good. We're getting to be that age. If there's a pretty woman on the street, you don't run up and kiss her. There are ways to approach people. And so, that's what I did. And it was kind of embarrassing because I'm a sophisticated psychologist and all my credentials. But essentially, I decided that this thing inside me had to get under control. And if it was going to get under control, I had to know when it was waking up, when it was taking control. To do that, I set up a kind of a tripwire, like a simple rule, so I could separate my healthy thoughts from my unhealthy thoughts about food. So one of the first ones was, I will never eat chocolate on a weekday again. I'll only ever eat it on the weekend. And that way, if I was in a Starbucks and there was a big chocolate bar on the counter calling my name, and I heard a little voice inside of me that said, you could just start again tomorrow, Glenn, because you worked out hard enough. You're not going to gain weight, even though it's a Wednesday. A couple of bites are not going to kill you. It'll be just as easy to start tomorrow. I'll say, wait a minute, that's not me. This is the embarrassing part. That's my inner pig, and it's squealing for pig slop. Chocolate on a Wednesday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And as ridiculous and crude as that sounds, it was the beginning of my recovery, because it would give me those extra microseconds at the moment of impulse, like open up a space between stimulus and
Mm-hmm.
response
Mm-hmm.
so that I could make a different choice if I wanted to.
Mhm. That's incredible. To me, though, that has an undertone of just of willpower, self-discipline, and shaming too.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Okay. First of all, I did not have to call it a pig. This was not something I was going to teach. This was something personal.
Mhm.
It happened to have taken off because I wound up writing a book out of the journal that I kept for all those years. And now it's kind of known as the pig in millions of, books online and everything. But I didn't have to call it that. And I tell people to call
Yes.
it a food monster or, okay. However, remember, loving that inner wounded child seems to be a goal separate and apart from taking control of this bodily organ. And you do need something because this is a survival drive. Your
Mm.
brain thinks that overeating is keeping you alive. So it's very reluctant to give it up.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Overeating is keeping you alive.
Well, yeah, but because, okay, if you think 100,000 years ago when food was really scarce,
Mhm.
you couldn't find 10,000 calories for very little effort by walking downstairs to the convenience store and then walk across the street and get another 10,000 calories in bags and boxes and containers. You would have to work really hard, and there was a chance you could die if you didn't find food. And so when you found food, uh, the learning would be very strong and very primal. And if you
Mhm.
look at the changes in the dopamine levels and like what actually happens in the brain,
Yes.
motivation is very strong. It's not just eating that makes you happy and motivated. It's knowing that you're going to go get it. It's when you're driving to 7-Eleven, it's when you're driving to the pizza place. It's the moment that you pass the pizza place on the highway and it feels inevitable that you're going to do it. That's your brain saying, this is where the calories are, even though calories are ubiquitous today. But it perceives that amount of calories in such a small space for so little effort to be a very scarce, urgent opportunity. And it thinks that it needs that in order to keep you alive.
Mhm.
It does.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood because I thought you said overeating keeps you alive.
Well, in the um, overeating does not keep you alive. Overeating can kill you, but the brain thinks that overeating will keep you alive because in the modern food environment, we've perverted the availability of calories, to some extent nutrition, but mostly calories and
Mhm.
sugar and fat and starch and oil and salt. And it just was not available before. So the brain just lights up. It's like a drug. It lights up
Yes.
and it says, where else can I get this many calories in such a small space for so little effort?
Mm.
Um, and it thinks that the it's found a gold mine, and it thinks that you have a unique survival advantage because you can get to so many calories so quickly and so easily. That's why it's so hard to give up. That's why it's so powerful.
My gosh. So what constitutes then a food obsession? And what is the difference between binge eating and overeating?
So I wrote an article about this on Psychology Today because it's the first question people ask is how do you diagnose whether you're a binge eater or an anorexic or and I say, first of all, I'm actually not out here preaching psychology. I'm out
No.
preaching training and education and coaching for a different reason.
Yes.
Um, because I think it's the wrong question. Now, I can answer that question because I happen to be a psychologist. And, if you look up DSM-5 binge eating definition, you'll find the criteria. It has to do with frequency and the extent of self-loathing that you experience and your efforts to stop and the perception that you can't stop. There are a number of things that go into that diagnosis of binge eating disorder. It's good that we have that diagnosis because then we can study what medications work and what particular interventions might work for that most severe form of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
However, look at the World Health Organization statistics on diabetes and cancer and heart disease and kidney disease even. They're way up. And mostly they're up from diet reversible or diet preventable problems. And if 40% of the population is obese and twice as many people are dying from heart attacks on a percentage basis that used to, and 80% more people have diabetes. Don't you think that people who, if only 4% of the population has binge eating, but 40% of the people are obese, and most people have a little weight to lose and eat beyond their own best judgment, don't you think it would be wise to say, I'm not going to wait until I'm diagnosed with binge eating before I address this? Let me figure out how I can just eat within my own best judgment, especially because what I'm suggesting has no pills, surgery, or powders or potions. It's really just a thought technique and a way of organizing your mind with regards to how you eat and what you eat. So, what do you have to lose by just learning how to eat within your own best judgment rather than waiting until you develop a full-blown eating disorder?
Mm.
That's what I have to say about that.
Yes. I mean, this problem is extremely prevalent, especially in Western society today. And people know that what they're doing is essentially killing them, but they can't stop. So, how much of that is due to the food industries rather versus willpower, or by what you're saying, the
Okay.
two are connected?
Well, I'd like to address willpower for a minute because there's a misunderstanding. People think I'm
Yes.
saying just use willpower. Willpower is the ability to make a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
There are only so many good decisions you can make over the course of the day. It's like we wake up with a full tank of gas that fuels our willpower brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then every decision that we make, not just food decisions, but every
Mm-hmm.
decision we make,
Mm-hmm.
wears down, burns that gas
Mm-hmm.
until by the end of the day, we're really spent. And this is why nighttime eating is such a problem. Nighttime overeating is such a problem. Okay. So if you know that willpower is the ability to make good decisions, that what you want to do is think about the difficult food decisions you have to make and make them ahead of time. So if I say I will never have chocolate on a weekday again, all of my chocolate decisions all week long have been made. And I'm going to get to what causes the food obsession in a little bit, right? So I've actually eliminated the need for willpower during the week, as compared to, well, just eat well 90% of the time and indulge yourself 10% of the time. How do you know which is the 90% and which is the 10%? Since you
Yes.
don't know, right?
Yes.
Since you don't know, you're going to have to make decisions every time you're in front of something tempting, as opposed to deciding beforehand and not having to spend your willpower. So it's actually the opposite. This actually eliminates the need for willpower, except for the very early part of entering a new rule where you extinguish your cravings, where you go through the extinction curve, because we can talk about that extinction curve and how the brain extinguishes cravings through discomfort. And during that period, you will need some willpower, but the truth is you won't be burning it with decision making, so you should have more available to get you through that period. And then after that, you won't need willpower, because eventually the way it works is you make a rule, I'll never have chocolate during the week. And at first you have a little honeymoon period. Then there's a big burst, a big spike in cravings. We can talk about why that is if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes down. There's a couple of more little spikes. And then the brain labels it as dormant. It doesn't erase it. It labels it as dormant. The reason it doesn't erase it is because this was a habit that you taught the brain for acquiring calories. And 100,000 years ago, if maybe that behavioral routine, the classic example I use is a caveman following a monkey to a banana tree. Maybe eventually the monkey stopped leading him to banana trees because they got scarce. The season went on and the bananas got scarce.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it stopped working. The brain doesn't want to waste energy, so it'll label the monkey as a dormant signal. So it's not going to generate cravings when it sees the monkey anymore. But the moment that a monkey leads you to a banana tree, the moment that you indulge the craving,
Mm-hmm.
it comes roaring back. It comes roaring right back. Okay, so that's the issue about willpower. Let's talk about the
Yes.
issue about shame.
Can I just say something, just backing back? What you said about decision making, that we only make so many a day, and by the end of the day, we are fatigued. I so believe in decision fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And the less amount of decisions that you can make on a daily basis by setting yourself up is a real thing. It's like I decide what I'm going to wear the night before. So in the morning, I don't have to make that decision. It's like one less decision that morning. I already know what I'm going to have for lunch the next day because I eat
Yes.
leftovers, you know, like all those things. And having even scheduling and planning, they help with that decision fatigue
Enormously, enormously.
enormously. But that makes total sense. That is why people have problems with their evening meal, is because of that. By the time they've got to the end of the day, it's like another decision. They're in decision fatigue. So they don't want to think about it. They're just going to consume whatever is there and not even have to make a decision about the amount they're going to consume.
That's why you want to make your nighttime decisions in the morning. Figure out what you're going to have when you get home from work. Put it in Tupperware. Have
Mm,
it, sitting in the front of the refrigerator so that you remember as soon as you open it. Pop it in the microwave, and there's dinner for you. Don't wait until you get home and you're tired and you say, "Well, what am I going to eat?" Um, Marissa, it's also why, if you're struggling in restaurants, that you could make a rule for yourself that you never go into a restaurant before you've decided what you're going to have beforehand. And what I will do,
mm-hmm,
like if I'm going out to eat or something with someone, I'll write it into my Google Calendar for that day. I'll look at the menu online. Maybe I'll call the restaurant and say, if this is not available, what else could I have? And I'll make the decision before I go.
mm-hmm,
That way, in the moment of temptation, when the waiter is trying to seduce you into this appetizer or that appetizer or this dinner or that dinner, or this dessert or that dessert, and the restaurant's whole business model rests on seducing you and overwhelming you with decisions, you don't have to do that. You've already made what you need to do, and you're good to go.
mm.
You're good to go. So
Do you think that you it sounds like there's a lot of structure and, carefully thought out strategies around your eating?
yeah.
Yeah. Is that because of the struggles that and challenges that you've had yourself? Now, I'll just share a scenario regarding myself. I actually had an eating disorder many, many years ago. My first husband committed suicide, and then
I'm so sorry.
15 months later, thank you, 15 months later, my father died. So it was two traumatic events, extremely traumatic events in a very short period of time. And I became bulimic. I remember the night so vividly that I spiraled into this eating disorder. And it was because I felt that I had a hole in the pit of my stomach from that loss that needed to be filled.
Mhm.
So I remember I ate a whole massive sponge cake and I couldn't stop eating it. I didn't even eat sponge cakes, but I found it in the fridge and I started eating it and I didn't even realize I'd done it till it was done. And then I felt so guilty that I went and purged. And that was the start of me having a 5-year battle with bulimia. And it was this constantly wanting to fill a hole in the gap of my stomach, in the pit of my stomach.
Mhm.
And now, fast forward so many years later, decades later, I too am very structured around food and simple things like I know what I'm going to eat for breakfast every morning, and I tend to eat the same thing because that makes me feel safe and in control. When I go out I have coffee every morning and I pack in a little container, yay big, one biscuit. And I had that one biscuit every day
Mhm.
and have done for decades in a little container.
Mhm.
And then I am very strict with what I eat for lunch. I actually don't like going out for lunch so much because I like to eat leftovers from the night before. So I too have become really kind of rigid in what I eat, but I've
Regimented. Yeah.
regimented, yeah, in what I eat. But I feel that gives me a sense of control as well. Is that a
Yeah.
bad thing? Is that what you're talking
I,
about
I
in a
don't, I don't
sense?
think, I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it's possible to get carried away with it, and there are could be a point where it was interfering with your life or taking too much
Oh,
energy
no,
away from other things.
no.
Most people tell me that it gives them energy for other things because they feel all tucked in and safe,
Mm,
and it's like I, we drive in a very structured environment. We have a lot of rules of the road. There are red lights and stop signs and yield signs and established things for us to do there. And because we know that, we can actually enjoy driving. We've planned ahead of time what we're going to do when the light is red, what we're going to do when the light is green, what we're going to do when we can yield. And as a result, there can be a free flow of traffic and commerce through the city. There can be a free flow of socialization. We can actually have a civilization because of that rigidity and structure, that regimentation. Now, if I were a city traffic planner and I put too many red lights in the city where they weren't necessary,
mm,
then I would be sacrificing the city's freedom of movement, right? So your goal,
yes.
if I put too few there, I'd be making a dangerous situation. Your goal is to optimize both variables. The analogy with food is you want enough regimentation so that all those dangerous intersections are covered. I knew I got carried away with chocolate. I had to make a rule with chocolate. I also got carried away with flour and sugar, and so I had some different, conditions that I used for flour and sugar. Um, when I had them, I felt so incredibly safe. Like I knew what to do, and all I had to do was follow those rules, and everything was okay. Then I could enjoy eating. When I didn't
Yes.
have those rules, right? Because when I
Yes.
didn't have the rules, it was
Yes.
dangerous. It was dangerous to eat. I couldn't enjoy eating because I
Mm-hmm.
was going to get carried away.
Mm-hmm.
Like I might have four of those sponge cakes. I'm
Yes.
not playing a competition game,
Well,
but I could have
don't
definitely
let's
out-ate you.
not compete here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's no, but I do enjoy eating. Don't get me wrong. I love going out for dinner.
Mhm.
I do go away on holidays and really enjoy food and soak in the cuisine everywhere I go. I'm not, this is not a military operation here, but I do have some sort of regimentation because, at the end of the day, when you've had some kind of addiction, you're in recovery. They never say that you're healed. They say you're in. So I'm a recovering food addict. So I do have things that help me cope in my day-to-day life that
Mhm.
keep me on track. But
Mhm.
anyway, we have gone way on track. You are going to talk about willpower.
We talked about willpower and how it was related to decision fatigue,
Oh, the
and
decision
and
fatigue. Yes.
and how having a rule actually prevented you from becoming fatigued with decisions and gave you more freedom.
Yes.
Um, and I think that freedom actually sits on top of willpower and discipline. For example, the car that I drive was designed by very disciplined engineers who ensure that when I turn the wheel 30 degrees to the right, that
Mm,
my car wheels are going to turn 30 degrees to the right. And because of that, I can drive all around the city. I've got a freedom of locomotion. Without that discipline, I wouldn't have that. I was a jazz musician, as I told you last time. And without having studied my scales and the structure of music, I would not have the freedom to express my soul. I wouldn't have the freedom to do that. Um, so I wanted to kind of illustrate that relationship that, um, Jim Rohn said a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. And Peter McWilliams said, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. And I think those are two fundamental truths about maturity and adulthood. That
mm.
if you want to be in a society and function with as much freedom as possible, you're going to have to adopt some disciplines, and you're not going to be able to have absolutely everything, but you can choose to pursue whatever you want to. Um, okay, so I wanted to talk about the shame because that's a very confusing thing to some people. And
Yes, please.
okay, so first of all, shame can be very pernicious, and it actually is a root cause of overeating. Um, the the negative self-critical voice that you hear after you make a food mistake. Why can't I stop eating so much? What's wrong with me? I'm sick. I'm pathetic. I'm diseased. I'm broken. Um, that actually beats down your confidence so that you can't resist the next binge. And that's actually the function of it. It's your reptilian brain wanting you to feel so weak that you can't resist the next one. Now,
Mm.
we do need to be able to feel a little bit guilty sometimes. Guilt is not an entirely dysfunctional thing. Like, if you touch a hot stove, you need that pain for the moment so you know where the hot stove is,
Mm.
so you can make adjustments and move on.
Yeah. And
But
you
you're not
don't do
supposed,
it again.
so you don't do it again, right? So,
Yeah.
so you can figure out, how did I miss it?
Yes.
Pay attention. It's an attention getting mechanism. What you don't want to do is say, oh my God, I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher. I might as well put my whole hand down on the stove, because I'm hopeless. I'm powerless over hot stoves, right? You don't want to do that. So what we learn from that is that the healthy function of pain is to get our attention, and then we need to be able to let it go.
Hmm.
Same with guilt. The healthy function of guilt, like if you make a rule and you break it, you're not supposed to feel good about that. But once you've turned guilt into responsibility, once the guilt has gotten your attention, you've asked, okay, so I missed the bullseye. By how much? In what directions? What adjustments do I need to make? Once you've made those adjustments, there's no purpose of feeling guilty anymore. You really want to let it go. So I'm not in favor of people feeling overly shameful or overly stuck on guilt. As a matter of fact, I work with people all the time to let that go. Um, when when our children grow up and function in society, we are already using rules, unwritten rules,
Mm.
and helping them to feel better about themselves when they adopt a discipline, right? Don't you want to be a big boy and use the potty? Big boys use the potty. Big boys never go in the living room, right? Now, is that shaming, or is that building a discipline that's going to help the kid to grow up and function and go to school and be in society? And there are other philosophies of toiletry.
Yes. Well, I suppose for me, like listening to you say that, okay, so I'll just say as someone who doesn't know the answer to the question, but I would think it would depend in the tone that you would say that and the context that you would say it in.
Yeah, yeah. And you want to emphasize being proud of the good behavior rather than being ashamed of the bad behavior, right?
Mm.
Um, when when little children learn to go potty in the potty, they're incredibly proud. They feel that now I'm a big boy, now I'm a big girl. Look what I can do. And we give them an opportunity to have a much bigger role in the world. They get to go to school. I mean, there are daycare
Mm.
centers where you can wear diapers and everything like that, but to really have mobility and freedom and do the fun things that kids want to do to learn and grow, they're better off when they're toilet trained. And certainly, when they're going to elementary school and junior high school, they need to have done that. So what I'm saying here is that adopting a discipline, making it part of your character, being the kind of person that doesn't have chocolate during the week, or that always puts their gym clothes out at night, or never goes back for seconds. It's something that people start to feel proud of, and it's it's a it's a life-giving, self-esteem enhancing process, not a shameful process if you use it in the right
Mm.
way. So I,
Hmm.
I talk about that a lot in the book because people are concerned about that. So
Yes. So it sounds like a lot of the shaming comes from within as well. It's not just external, it's intrinsic.
yeah.
People feel ashamed, they're embarrassed. Yes. So it sounds like, just backing back, and we're going to move on from this and talk about your book. But it sounds like these food industries have a lot to be accountable for, a lot of these food companies.
Well, yeah, because they're using plausible deniability, like, saying this ice cream is made with avocado oil, and so therefore it's better for you, or potato chips are made with avocado oil, or, you know, it's got 50% less salt, which is good, but it's still got enough salt to give you a stroke, which is just bad. And the rational brain just needs a little reason to get out of the way, because the
Yes.
reptilian brain can provide so much more pleasure
Yes.
that if you make it plausibly deniable that you're self-destructing, then That's all that people need to go forward.
Mm.
And they put in things in the packaging that makes it hard to know when you're hungry and full. And they prey on your variety impulse by engineering a variety of different flavors into the, chips or cookies on different assembly lines so that you're constantly searching for more micronutrients, because in nature, if you had a variety of different tastes, you'd get a variety of different micronutrients. So they're pressing all those evolutionary buttons. It's strong
That
stuff.
is
Strong
messed
stuff.
up. That is so messed up. Is this not unethical?
Um, I mean, I think so, but
I
you
mean,
know,
clearly, because isn't this killing people?
I think it is. I think it is. You know, I don't think the people that are there that I've met are evil, though. I think that
No.
they're driven by market forces. I
And
think they've got
money,
and I mean, I
clearly
was on the
money.
wrong. I was paid a fortune to do this kind of thing 25 years ago, and I was on the wrong side of the war. I was seduced by it. I feel guilty about it. I'm trying to atone for those sins down the road. So I guess I do think that there's an unethicalness about it. But I think the only way it's
Mm,
going to change if people make an active effort to think through what's healthy and what's not healthy, and they stop voting with their dollars, because the company is going to chase the dollars
mm,
unless there are enough people that develop a groundswell of organization and legislation to prevent it. Um,
mm.
so
That's
yeah,
not going to happen anytime soon.
not in our lifetime, most likely.
No,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Now, you too, you've done quite a bit of research that you spent several decades researching the nature of binging and overeating with your own patients, and a self-funded research program where you had over 40,000 participants. So tell us about that work that you did.
Well,
Sounds
that
fascinating.
this is during the time I was getting paid a lot of money to do these big studies, so I thought I'd do one for myself. I
So
said
this was on the quiet.
this is on the quiet. I did this myself. It was in the days that internet clicks were cheap,
Mm-hmm,
and I got 40,000 people over the course of about 5 years to come to my website, and they took a survey where they explained to me what they were feeling stressed about.
mm-hmm,
I would intercept them if they were searching for stress management or stress solutions. And I asked them what they were feeling stressed about and what they couldn't stop eating when they felt stressed. And I found that small correlations, but significant. There were people stressed at work who couldn't stop eating pretzels and chips and salty, crunchy things. People stressed at home who couldn't stop eating bagels and pasta and breads and soft, starchy, chewy things. And people like me who were stressed in their marriage or feeling lonely or brokenhearted or a little depressed, who couldn't stop eating chocolate. And I thought that was going to be the solution. So I thought then, okay, you work on the marriage or you work on the stress at work. But it didn't really lead me to the solution. The story I tell is I actually called my mom. Did I tell you the story before I forget?
You did, but that's fine. Tell us the story. I'd love to
Okay.
hear it again.
So I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm trying to figure out, why don't I go to chocolate when I feel depressed? I've got this big study that says that people do that, feel depressed or lonely or, brokenhearted.
Yes.
And, I'm struggling in the marriage and I do feel like that and it makes sense, but why? How did this get set up?
Mm-hmm.
And my mom got this awful look on her face and this awful sound in her voice. And she said, Honey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But when you were a little boy, 1 or 2 years old in 1965, 1966, um, my dad, your grandfather, was just out of prison, and he had disappeared for a couple of years. And I had idolized him. He was my whole life. And when I found out he was in prison and he was guilty, I got just catatonically depressed. I was just horrifically depressed. I wanted to sit and stare at the wall. And to top it off, your dad was a captain in the army, and they were talking about sending him to Vietnam. And I figured I'm going to be an army widow with two small kids because we were trying to get pregnant with your sister. And so I didn't have the wherewithal to hold you and love you and play with you when you felt, lonely or hungry or sad. So I kept a big bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup in a refrigerator on the floor. And I said, go get your Bosco, honey. and you go crawling over and you'd get it out of the refrigerator and you'd suck on the bottle and you go into a chocolate sugar coma. And it was at that point, yeah. So
Wow. Whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
it's a sad
Yes.
story.
Mm.
So if this were a movie, then my mom and I would have had a big hug and a big cry, and I never would have struggled with chocolate again. And we did have a little hug and a cry. It was on Skype actually, but we
Yes.
did have a metaphorical
Yes.
one.
Yes.
And I learned all about her. I asked her a lot more about that time and what she was going through. And it was very meaningful and helpful conversation to have.
Hmm.
But that's when things actually got a lot worse for me with my binge eating
Really?
because
So it didn't help, it made it worse.
because inside my head was this voice of justification. And it said, you know what, Glenn, you're right. Our mama didn't love us enough and she left a great big chocolate-sized hole in your heart. And if you can, until you can fix the loneliness or fix the depression, get out of the marriage and find the love of your life, you're going to have to go right on eating chocolate. Yippee, let's go get some right now.
Mm.
And at that point, I realized that, if you had a fireplace in the living room with a roaring fire, but it was a really good fireplace, that fire is an asset, not a liability. Suppose the fire is your emotion or your emotional traumas. People would gather around and tell stories and make memories and laugh and cry and hug. It's only when there's a hole in the fireplace, something poked a hole in the fireplace, that ashes can get out and do damage. So I kind of adopted that model. And I said, what if all this time I'm trying to put out the fire, understand what started it, try to be a detective or whatever? What if what I really need to do is just figure out what's wrong with the fireplace? And it turned out what was wrong with the fireplace was that my inner pig was saying crazy things like, it'll be just as easy to start tomorrow. No, it's not. The way that the brain works, if you have a craving for chocolate today and you say, I'll just start tomorrow, and then you eat the chocolate, you will have reinforced the craving and reinforced the thought. So you're more likely to have a deeper craving tomorrow, and you're more
Mm.
likely to say, let's just start tomorrow. Tomorrow snowballs downhill. You can only ever use the present moment to be healthy. So that's when I started realizing I had to wake up at that moment of impulse and start asking, what's my pig saying? How is it wrong? And how do I fix it? So I could stop letting the pig poke holes in the fireplace. And that's how that research study led me to write the first book that got so popular.
Is that the book that we're talking about? Defeat Your Craving?
Defeat Your Cravings is something I developed because the, so, okay, I published the book in 2015, got wildly popular. I mean, I knew what I was doing because I was in marketing and my partner was in marketing. Got wildly popular, got a million readers, got a
What book is
gig.
this? You can plug the book.
Oh, I don't want to plug that book because it's the old book, if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want people, I want people to read the new book because it's much more accurate and helpful.
Okay.
And you'll understand
Okay.
why
Thank you.
you'll understand why in a minute. I mean,
Okay.
people will figure out what it is if they really want to. But the book I want you to read is Defeat Your Cravings because
Hmm.
it's has the benefit of the following 8 years of additional scientific understanding, experience with 2,000 clients, and I supervise 10 coaches, and I've been on 400 of these podcasts and radio shows, and had a lot of. I've been immersed in this for 8 years. I wrote 8 books, and this is the culmination of all that. Defeat Your Cravings. The reason it's different is that in the original book, I just taught people the way that I recovered, which was, hey, I've got this thing inside me. I can figure out when it's active if I can set up these rules. When the thing gets active, let me figure out what it's saying and why it's wrong and figure out what the right way to think is. I took away all my excuses. I fixed my thinking about food. That's how I recovered. It made a really big difference. When I started teaching other people to do it, we got really fast at fixing their thinking. So, the 7 or 8 years that I was running those programs,
Hmm.
that's what we did. We called it rational refutation. We taught people to do it really quickly. We discovered that there were really only 40 or 50 excuses that anybody had anyway. It wasn't thousands like we thought it was going to be. And that there were pre-made answers we can give them. So it got really fast to fix your thinking. Um, Turns out though that so our measurements at that time, not in a double blind, objective third party study, but in our survey follow up measurements, we found that people had an 89.4% reduction in overeating in the first month. And that was
Incredible.
real. It was really incredible.
Mm,
When I checked it at 6 months and then a year, it was more like 55%. And I didn't like that. Still pretty
okay.
good.
Yes.
Turns out that that was comprised of a group of people who kept using the technique, and they were more like 75, 80%, and people who didn't, who were doing just as badly as the people who dropped out were doing just as badly as they were before. So then I said, well, why are people dropping out? Because this is such a powerful technique. I've been relatively fit and thin for almost 20 years using it. I have hundreds of testimonials. Why would people drop out? Turns out that eventually you get to the point, most people do, where they say, okay, I don't have any excuses anymore. You took away all my excuses, but oh, well, what the hell? Screw it. Just do it. I just really, really want to. So we call that the screw it, just do it response. Then I said, well, what's causing that? That's the problem. What's causing that? Over the last year or two, before I actually wound up splitting with a business partner and writing the new book,
Hmm.
before I wrote the new book, I really researched what was causing that. It turns out to be something you'd call organismic distress. It's a lack of proper nutrition, like regular, reliable, proper nutrition.
Right.
It's fatigue, like not getting enough sleep. It's not getting enough water. It's being too isolated, not having enough of a social network. It's decision fatigue. All of these other elements of self-regulation, which is what most other programs focus on entirely without fixing your thinking. All those other elements of self-regulation turn out to be critical to avoid the screw it, just do it response. So I now understand fixing your thinking to be a necessary but not sufficient element of overcoming overeating. There are all these self-regulatory behaviors you have to engage in to find dopamine elsewhere and,
Hmm.
you know, recognize that you're a fallible human being, that you require maintenance and care. There are some rules you can't make. You can't say, I will never sleep again or I'll never pee again, because in a certain number of hours, your brain is going to, and your bladder are going to make you do that. So it turns out you really have to take care of yourself. You can't ignore all that stuff if you want to stick to a plan. And then if you if you stick to the plan long enough, eventually the cravings go away. Eventually the brain labels it dormant and then it becomes infinitely easier. But it does require an emphasis on both those things. And so defeat your cravings is about how you can kill your cravings eating what you love, and get the most difficult cravings out of the way with the scientific understanding of the extinction curve and how to get them labeled dormant, like 30 to
Hmm.
60 days for a daily craving.
You call this a backdoor approach.
Yeah, it's a backdoor approach because I call it the backdoor to weight loss. The reason I do that is that we've discovered that trying to lose weight too quickly and getting panicked about it is just another form of organismic distress. See, all of this stress, all of this distress, what it does is it makes the brain more likely to perceive that there's an emergency.
Hmm.
And if a hungry tiger was chasing you, or if there was a scarce caloric opportunity, if you lived in a famine environment, then your brain would want to override your rational self. Your reptilian brain would override the rational brain to say, you got to get those calories. You just gotta. We need them. We need them. We need them. So it turns out that the panic about weight loss usually forces people to eat too little. You
Mm.
know, they go on a really strict diet and they push their brain into what it thinks is a famine situation. And if you think about it, as we were evolving, it would have been a survival advantage if we lived in a feast and famine environment, that if there was a long famine and all of a sudden calories were available, we'd better hoard them. And so
Yes.
they're creating the binge response with this panic. So
Yes.
I tell people, the fastest way to lose weight is slowly, a pound or two a week. Reliably, 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 reliably. Flood your body with nutrition, add a slight caloric deficit, and try not to panic about losing weight. Just try to love yourself before you've arrived, and
Mm.
work your way on the journey slowly
Mm.
but surely. Yeah.
Is that why people can't stick to a diet or an eating plan, as I like to call it, because they try to do it too quickly, or they don't have enough information, or it's not the right eating plan for them specifically?
It's often the case. that's often the case. It's also often the case that people are frightened of rules. And so they don't really know where the bullseye is. So if you're just going to eat well 90% of the time and eat badly 10% of the time, or you're just going to try to eat mindfully, which is a good idea to eat mindfully. But if you're going to try to manage everything by just eating mindfully, um, you can't really do that in today's society. When
Mm,
there are chemicals in the food that you're eating that turn off your ability to know when you're hungry and full, when there are unnatural concentrations of calories and, you know, all these excitotoxins that make you want more, 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 more. It's really, really hard to eat mindfully. Like I don't think a bag of potato chips is really set up to eat mindfully. I know it's possible to do it, but you're really handicapping yourself from the outset. So if you're frightened of rules, if you're not willing to rely on them to distinguish between, you know, like my grandfather used to say, which was a Yogi Berraism, if you don't know what you're aiming for, you're going to hit something else. People don't necessarily
yes.
know what they just say. I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, stop when I'm full. I'm going to try to eat mindfully.
Mm,
I don't think that really works very well. I know there's a whole philosophy that says that it does, but I think in the modern food environment, it's very hard to do that.
mm. I think the problem is with society, a lot of it is media, social media, and the absolute bombardment of information that we hear about diet, the next new diet, about these weight loss pills that are out now, that there's so much. So then why would people be inclined to follow your diet or your eating plan or the information that you're sharing? What puts you in a position that that you say, okay, this is going to work?
So this is diet agnostic, and it's largely common sense. If you kind of listen, I know we went over a lot of things, but
We
if you
did.
read the book or listen through it, I don't know that I really invented anything. I think I'm a very good narrator and organizer of
Hmm.
information. Um, there is no diet. This is diet agnostic. As long as you're willing to nutrify yourself reasonably and not try to lose weight too quickly,
Hmm.
then this can help you. Um, this is a set of conscious and purposeful routines for installing character traits. I know that sounds like a big leap, but character is just what you do habitually at the moment of temptation. So it's not that you're going to have a rule in your head that says, I never eat chocolate on a weekday. Eventually, you just become a person who doesn't have chocolate during the week, and you don't even really have to think about it.
Mm,
Um, so this is a very serious attempt and a discipline to help you to decide what kind of person you want to be with food. Um, it can eliminate your food obsession also, by the way, because if you know you're never going to have chocolate during the week, then your brain stops wanting to waste the energy on trying to get you to have chocolate during the week. And that seems to be what's responsible for the food obsession. It's like walking with a kid past a candy store or a toy store. If they know they only get it on Saturdays, if they got good grades all week long, then they're not going to have a fit after a while. They're not going to have a fit during the week if you walk past the toy store. It's the same thing with your brain. If it knows that can't, if it knows that the reward is not a possibility, then it eventually wants to conserve energy and just take care of itself and leave you alone. So I think
mm,
that people would want to do it because this is really an anti-diet mentality. It's an anti-willpower mentality. It's a it's largely common sense. It's largely codified common sense. Um,
mm.
and also because, I offer the book for free and, they can get started without really much risk at all. And there are
That's
recorded
right.
coaching sessions. And yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to cost anyone anything. Yes. One thing you talk about the chocolate, not eating the chocolate during the week. About 13 months ago, I was diagnosed with COPD, and I made a decision after a lot of investigating different types of eating plans that I would try to eliminate processed foods as much as possible, that I would try and eat an anti-inflammatory diet as much as possible to
Mhm.
keep it under control, to help manage it.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I gave up, it was like a decision that came out of nowhere. And I loved fries. Loved fries, especially McDonald's fries. Loved. If ever we went out anywhere, fries was my thing. I decided I was going to give up fries because if I could give up fries, I could deal with anything. Like
Mm, hmm.
so, and it's weird when we go out and there's fries, I don't order fries. And if they're on my plate because it comes with the meal, I don't touch them. And it feels like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah. You labeled it dormant. You became a person who doesn't eat fries.
I am a person that doesn't eat fries, and I'm actually really good with that, especially given how much I love them. And there's, you talk about making the 4 categories of rules. And I loved this. I actually did it
Oh,
because,
good.
yes, there's the always, the nevers, the conditionals, and the unrestricteds. So, how
Mhm.
does that help people?
Well, it just gives them a structure to consider. You see my cat in the background.
I love
Uh,
your cat. Your cat's been very busy during this interview.
oh, that's
Very
funny.
busy.
Yeah, he thinks he's the main reason for it.
I know,
Um,
right? He's the star of the show.
he's the star. That's Theo, everybody. That's Theo.
Yeah, love
Um,
Theo.
so it helps to consider if there's anything you'd never like to have again, because most people never think about that.
Mhm.
And you don't ever have to eat French fries again. There's no doctor that's going to diagnose you with a French fry deficiency, right?
It's on my nevers.
Yeah.
It's my nevers is fries.
They, there's no reason. There's no. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor, so maybe I can't say this, but I can't imagine that there's a medical reason that you have to eat French fries.
Mhm.
Um, and most people just never consider it. Like, never? I could never have that, but no, you don't have to have it. Always helps you to consider more positive routines that are adding or building into your health rather than things that you're giving up. So I always have
Mhm.
2 glasses of spring water before I start my day, or always I always have a big green smoothie before I have anything solid to eat during the day. You
Mhm.
start to crowd out the unhealthy food rather than having to give any of it up. You just start to crowd it out. Conditionals remind you that the brain is complex. And if you don't want to give something up, you can attempt to bind it to a very specific context or condition.
Mhm.
Like I only ever have chocolate on the weekend, or I only have pretzels at Major League Baseball stadiums.
Mhm.
And unconditionals just remind you that there should be something you can have when you're hungry, um, if you really need to. It just kind of helps you to think that all through. So that's why I came up with the 4 categories
I
of food.
love it. Yeah, my conditionals were pasta, alcohol, and dessert.
Uh-huh. And how did you work that out? What were your conditional rules?
Based on the fact that I'm trying to um, eat like less unprocessed foods, I've thought that pasta and most things contained in desserts will probably be ruled out, and trying to keep refined sugars down, and alcohol, because when I drink alcohol, it causes me to overheat. My body temperature increases and I have trouble sleeping.
Oh,
So, so I thought, no, I need to limit alcohol, and I just have alcohol on the weekends, a
there you go.
limited amount of, yeah. So I usually, so this is, it's not a never, but usually I'd say 99% of the time, no alcohol Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And
I just want people to know to start with one simple rule, something you could and would do that isn't too much of a burden. I won't go back for seconds. Um, I will never eat standing up, or I only eat food when I'm sitting at the table, or I'll always take 3 deep breaths before a meal. So something that would start with a low bar that you could and would do that you're going to do consistently, because I want to trigger your identity function. I want you to be able to say, I'm someone who always has a green smoothie in the morning. I'm someone who always puts their gym clothes out before I go to bed. I'm someone who never goes back for seconds. When your brain observes you having a win consistently like that, it starts to say, I must be the kind of person who doesn't do that. Wonder what else that kind of person does.
Mm,
And it becomes less about white knuckling it and feeling like you have a bunch of mean policemen in your head that you have to be careful around. And it becomes more like, this is the person I want to become. So you start with one simple rule. Usually, if there's no medical emergency, don't worry about weight loss for a couple of weeks. Once you feel like you're winning the game, and once you make this rule, you'll have that part of you that wants to break it, and you'll say, well, that's my inner food monster, and it's moaning for monster mush. Why does it want me to break the rules, and why is it wrong? And you figure out why it's wrong and write it down. Um, you'll start to make some progress. You'll start to have some power that you didn't know that you had. And with that in hand, you can make adjustments and learn the technique further and work it out so you get to the weight that you want to slowly but surely.
mm,
So
mhm.
wanted to make sure we got that in. One simple rule.
Yes. So what's your legacy here?
What's my legacy?
Yes.
I would like to help 1 million people a year to stop overeating. That's I would feel like my life was worthwhile if I did that.
That would
Um,
be massive.
that would be massive, and we're on the way. We're getting there. We're on the way.
Really? You're on getting close to 1 million people.
Well, no, I mean we've had 1 million readers. I have a Psychology Today column that's had 1 million readers. Um, Actual paying clients has been about 2,000. Um, I've been in about 400 podcasts. There are
But
people
this
that
one's
listen.
the best one.
This is the best one ever.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to go on any others anymore. This is just it's just where I have to be.
Okay.
Marissa, you're so cool.
Oh, thank you. So are you. So are you. And we're going to share your links with our listeners, especially to the free book that you
Defeatyourcravings.com. Click the big blue button. You'll get a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. You'll get a copy of food plan starter templates for any dietary philosophy, and you will get a set of recorded full-length coaching sessions so you can see how this all works.
really, you get those as well.
All free. All
Wow.
free.
That's incredible. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Glenn. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show, and look forward to seeing you and Theo again sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Hope to catch up and hear how you're going, and love to hear when you get close to that 1 million.
Okay. You got it.
Yeah. Take it easy. Thank you for your time. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you on the show.
I'll talk to you then.
Okay. Bye.